Which brings us to an organization called Rewriting Ripley. That name might jog a memory or two for some people, because this group have been going after Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, Critical Drinker, myself, Ryan Kinnell, many others, in an effort to demonetize them and potentially have them removed from YouTube. Why? Because we dare speak up and out against this ideological crap, this anti-entertainment which spits in the face of what made these franchises great in the first place, and they have been trying this nonsense for years, since 2021.
Or I was ecstatic to be part of something that I grew up watching as a child, but every time G4 is brought up in various channels, even in this YouTube channel, we have the chat in front of us, I can see you, without a doubt, there will be backlash because I'm not as bangable as the previous host.
Actress Humberly Gonzalez, who plays Kay Vess in Star Wars Outlaws, has made some controversial comments claiming that the video game industry has a lot of misogyny, while also praising the game for only featuring a female point of view.
I'm curious if that's comparable to this sort of world, this culture of toxic fandom, where like if you make a movie, especially if you make a superhero movie, like you have great intentions, but there are always going to be a small yet vocal group of people there can kind of just be toxic.
Women do not exist to be nice on the eyes for you. Morgan Webb, Olivia Munn did not exist to be nice on the eyes for you.
Maybe say, we don't want you around if you're going to be
yeah,
and hateful. And that the games industry is diverse naturally. Not because anyone's making them be diverse, because the world is diverse, you stupid.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors in terms of diverse employment this year. And what we're doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors.
And if you have a problem with that, come fight me physically.
Has anyone taken you up on that?
We have done the experiment and controlled for the variable. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Peace.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.
Don't try to ruin my life with lies when your life can be ruined with the truth.
Hey everybody, today's video is going to be a long one and it's going to touch on some uncomfortable topics. This is being added to the recording after finishing it, and yeah, these topics, I don't necessarily dislike talking about them. If I did, I wouldn't make these videos, but they are topics that, after reflecting, despite being secure in what I said, can still make me a bit apprehensive because of how negative or heavy-handed the topics can progress into, especially in the later points of the video, even when I try to end it on a positive note and try to keep different points of view in mind. So yeah, before we jump in, I just wanted to say that regardless of whether we agree or disagree, I appreciate you guys and gals for even giving me the time of day. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel if you liked the video, and without further ado, let's jump in. In order to talk about the unfair demonization of gamers, we have to talk about several different elements of the overall problem. And that's what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be going point by point, and hopefully by the end we will reach a solid conclusion. Even though, you know, if you're not new to the channel, you would know that I do sometimes ramble a little bit, but I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible. I know that concepts such as Gamergate, where conflicts erupted in the gaming space, often painting gamers or the industry as a whole in a bad light, are not new. Hell, we can even go back decades and find media and politicians being adamantly against gaming, demonizing the whole medium as dangerous, using imagery to paint gamers as loner geeks and whatnot. And I also know that to some extent, some of these instances and depictions even had inklings of truth and sense attached to them. What often happened, as it is happening right now in a much larger scale, is that the people ahead of certain movements, such as feminist frequency back then, had all the wrong intentions, and even worse, the wrong way to try and enact what was a perceivably necessary change. I say perceivably because, like in many things in life, there is the truth of the person arguing from one side, then there's the truth of the person arguing from the other side, and then there's simply the truth. Around the time of the first Gamergate and all this Anita Sarkeesian drama, I was too young to care. I wasn't a kid or anything, but I just didn't bother with it. And I think a big part of that is the fact that it wasn't major enough to actually be noticed and acted on by as many people as are now currently taking up metaphorical arms in the current Gamergate conflict. I'm not trying to undermine what happened and the impact that it had, I am simply saying that it's definitely not as big as what is going on right now. All I really remember from it was in regards to female character roles in video games and what they wore. In other words, sexualization and tokenization of female characters with smoking hot bodies, mainly in roles of romance partners or damsels in distress. And this is something that I could totally get behind, you know? I think most gamers could, so long as it resulted in good compelling female characters in more prominent roles and presented more accurately in certain settings, like for example actually giving them armor to wear in RPGs, rather than a bikini with a couple of steel plates covering their breasts. And of course, whenever we're talking about realistic depictions, there are certain factors that we should take into account that do not imply that characters have to look ugly. I have a whole video dedicated to this kind of thing. For now, suffice it to say that I think that the industry reached a pretty good balance point there for a while, but then things just kept getting pushed and pushed way too far. Because of course it did. Because that's what radical activism always does. It always takes things too far. I don't really understand why, but sadly it is what it is. See, in my mind, if things ever got so bad and oppressive that I would have to take to the streets or whatever to be an activist against whatever it is that is going on, I would stop once change was effected and more of an equal status was achieved. Pushing it any further will only end up in you taking yourself and your own ideals down a path of radicalization, and then you will be the one who has to be stopped, especially when you've already gone so far as to have institutions and corporations pushing what you push. But some of these people, you know, the radical ones, they just keep going and going and going anyway. They never know when to stop. In a job position kind of sense, I actually understand perfectly why it is that these people cannot stop in the games industry. And that is literally because their jobs depend on it. And by the way, it's not just the games industry, of course, it's the whole entertainment industry. Just look at Disney. They were hired as activists into departments that fester that kind of thing, and now their positions are dependent on it. Stop pushing for more radical ideas and changes and your job is useless. So for example, let's say that you're one of the many activists shoved into one of the many of Ubisoft's DEI departments, now showing on screen. Your entire job is to push the envelope further and further with each new game and each new fiscal quarter. Like, let's say that you're part of the Latino, woman and gay department. Just because you helped launch Star Wars Outlaws, the first ever open world Star Wars video game starring a first ever queer Latina leading woman in a $100 million project, does not mean that your department closes down. I mean, to us, people with common fucking sense, that's precisely what it should mean. If you landed a project this major for your diversity, equity and inclusion department to influence, then it should mean that you won. You did it. You made it to the top of the mountain. The department is now useless because if you want to do it again with another franchise or do it again via a sequel, well, the company already knows what to do. Your role in being able to contextualize things uniquely or consult in accordance to your understanding and knowledge of Latino, gay and female culture and experience and points of view, or whatever the fuck it is that they do in these departments aside from leeching money from the company, is done. But of course, for the activists in these roles and for the company who needs to maintain these departments alive and well in order to make money off of BlackRock and other companies like it, which are happily funding this extremely divisive branch of the culture war through ESG incentives, they would disagree. They have to keep justifying their positions in these departments as well as the very existence of these departments themselves in the face of other investors and shareholders, so they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing over and beyond the point of reason and sense and tolerance. This is, for example, how we got to this partnership between Dove and Epic Games, which I already covered in my defeminization video on screen right now. An initiative that genuinely thinks that at the highest level of the games industry, you know, the AAA market, they should be making their female characters look like this. That this is what correct female representation should look like and what female gamers across the planet actually want to see. I don't even need to say anything more about this. This is delusion, intellectual dishonesty, and virtue signaling at the highest level. In fact, to call it virtue signaling even feels hollow. It's truly something that defies common sense. It's something that, when suggested seriously, should be inquired into in order to find out exactly what is wrong with the person or company pushing for it. And it's something that should be pushed unanimously against. This is one of the things that bother me about these kinds of matters. It's that certain people, especially on the left, look at things like these and refuse to speak against them because they don't want to appear as a bigot or something along those lines. And then this veil is created where if you talk against it, that must mean that you are a bigot and a chud and etc. But in reality, it has nothing to do with the existence of any bigotry or hatred or disgust or phobia of anything included in the picture. How many of us know a disabled person? How many of us know a fat person or are even a little bit overweight ourselves? I would wager that it's the overwhelming majority of us. How many of us would be unhinged enough to see an albino person or a person with Down syndrome and hate them for no reason? There's an insane level of intellectual dishonesty that insanely sanctimonious virtue signalers use when discussing these matters. It usually bogs down to, oh, you're against this campaign from Dove? Well, I guess you're a misogynistic, fatphobic, racist, ableist, body-shaming, chud piece of garbage. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It's a very disingenuous way to tackle the argument, and it does more harm than good because it makes their side look terrible, makes them look dumb, dishonest, and totally unreasonable. It is unnecessarily hostile and immediately makes them look like someone who can't have a logical conversation about anything when they cannot see the problems behind the initiative itself, the attempt at distorting reality, the desire in taking over so many aspects of the industry that would just destroy it. After all, nobody wants those designs as the main characters of our games. Dove doesn't even use them as models for their products and their advertising. People who launch accusations like those also give themselves away as totally out of touch with reality by being unable to realize the obvious lie in front of their face and the fact that female gamers, much like the dudes, want to play games with aesthetically pleasing characters. But anyway, let's step back for a second and enter the next topic. So then, why exactly are things so heated up? Why are initiatives like that Dove and Epic Games project and other things similar to that in the gaming space right now, nested deeply into the biggest studios and publishers in the Western gaming industry, such as DEI departments, consultants, and localization teams, filled with bold activists invigorated to take over more and more aspects of game development, famous IPs, and even gaming companies as a whole, so heavily criticized and straight up lambasted online and rejected by gamers? If gamers truly are not bigoted chuds, then why do they have a problem with the average female protagonist or random character of color? Why do they have a problem with seeing gender ideology representation built into the games that they play? Why do they have an issue with top surgery scars in a game about dragons, elves, and magic? If they truly are not bigots, then why do they care about these things? Well, it's a complicated matter with a lot of details, one that could fill several videos, but let's take it bit by bit and present a few of them on this one for now. We can always return to this matter in the future, as I suspect that we'll have to anyway, because instances like these are just constantly happening. Some people just never learn, and I suspect that we're going to be seeing a lot of this shit in 2025. First, we need to reframe the actual situation because as it stands, the question it is a totally disingenuous misrepresentation of it, fit to immediately put gamers between a rock and a hard place when it comes to trying to justify their arguments against these things. The question is framed in a way where it immediately puts you at a disadvantage. It's like a trap, fit to make you justify it with a bad statement, because it's hiding the actual reality of the situation. I have an entire video dedicated to a similar situation as to why Dragon Age Veilguard's character creator's top surgery scars were total BS, along with the arguments that people used saying that it shouldn't matter, that it's just inclusive, and if anyone has a problem with it, then they are just bigots and phobes and ists and etc. It was an argument that relied on the situation being solely about inclusion, and so of course if you are not pro-inclusion, then that must mean that you are a bigot. But the entire thing was framed very disingenuously, and it actually was hiding a bunch of fucking contextual information that not only made it a fact that it was never about inclusion, but it also justified legitimate problems that people could have with it. The same kind of thing is needed here, because to simply frame it as, oh, if you are against quote-unquote wokeness, influencing not just the content in your game, but also the very staff that gets hired to work on your games, then you're a bigot, or a phobe, or an ist, etc. We're going to be using the word ultra-bigot for the rest of the video as a blanket term for all of these meaningless things that people like to call the average Tony who just wants to enjoy a good game every once in a while without being hammered in the head with immersion-breaking ideology. So to just frame it like that, or any separate variety of it that tackles a singular instance, like for example, oh, if you're against inclusion of pronouns in your games, then you are an ultra-bigot. It's leaving out a metric fuckton of contextual history and information that has led us to where we are now. The very word woke or wokeness is often already taken and brushed aside by a lot of people online. If you use it in a negative context, like if you're complaining about something and you call it woke, you're immediately cast aside as just some mouth-breathing ultra-bigot, just some dumb patriarchal asshole who doesn't matter because you're part of a very, very tiny minority of bad, out-of-touch, backwards, intolerable people. And so, naturally, you should be dismissed, insulted, demonized, and even made an example of whenever possible for the benefit of the regime. To woked out studios and publishers, this also means that they don't want your money. They don't care about losing you as a customer.
If you don't like it, don't watch it. Peace!
Now, whether that is because of a delusional fantasy where they genuinely believe that they and people who think like them with such extremely strict views are the overwhelming majority of the gaming public, or because of some virtuous retardation where they don't want your money because they genuinely believe that you are evil, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, they are wrong on both counts. It's a very weird, out-of-touch, narcissistic, and pompous way to view the world. And unironically, this is kind of a big reason as to why Donald Trump won the election this year, and why in other areas of the world people are starting to lean right, because people on the left kept embracing and defending more and more radical and extreme views, while demonizing or dismissing the people speaking against it as some dumb, evil, backwards, hateful minority that does not matter, and in many cases even for things that should be common sense, like for example being against the transitioning of children. Jesus, I can't believe I even have to mention this. In the meantime, random, normal, moderate people who might have even identified and voted on the left previously were observing all of this ridiculous out-of-touch madness from afar. And they were realizing like, oh shit, these people are unhinged. They've lost the plot. And off they went and voted for the opposite option, because when you've gone off the deep end, the alternative will always look far better than you. It doesn't mean that they agree with everything that they have to say, it doesn't mean that they fully back every part of their plans, every policy, etc., but as long as they deem that the positives of the common sense from the right-leaning parties far outweigh the negatives of the delusion and lunacy of the left-leaning parties, they're going to vote for it and they're going to take the good with the bad. And this isn't exclusive to American politics, or even just to politics in general. It's alive and well in the games industry because more and more people are waking up to the actual reality of the situation and they're not liking it. They're not liking the bad quality games, they're not liking the manipulative language, they're not liking the demonization, they're not liking the fakeness and the disingenuousness, they're not liking the holier-than-thou attitude. They're not liking being told what to think and what to say, and most of all, they're not liking the inability to simply say, I don't like this game is a bad game, and the inability to say, I like this game is a good game. Without hive mind retards on Twitter, unhinged developers, and bought and paid for gaming journalists telling them that they are wrong because the games are optically and ideologically coded to either be hated or loved.
Fuck these boomers, fuck these yuppies, and fuck everybody now that I think of it.
People who make disingenuous arguments like these and who mock anyone who uses the word woke as someone who is automatically just some dumb baboon wallowing in hatred and ignorance are missing the entire point, and they're shooting themselves in the foot by turning away these people and these other quiet ones observing and making up their minds from far away, from their platforms, from their games, their movies, their shows, etc. I'm not going to sit here and do some silent majority preaching because, well, first of all, I don't actually know whether that's the case or not. All I know is that I'm speaking from a place of truth and sense, and regardless of the fact that, yes, of course, there are some people who just yell out woke, gay at everything and who are actually homophobic or racist and etc., just the same way as on the far left there's PDF files trying to use the LGBTQ+ community to legitimize and normalize their disgusting urges with their own little flag and their own little letter to add to the acronym. At the end of the day, I don't care about these kinds of arguments of extremes because there's always going to be bad people in the world, no matter what group they're in, no matter what political affiliations they have. What I mainly care about is the meat of an argument, the actual perception of what is going on, the actual truth of a situation, because beyond all of that nonsense, truth and sense is still going to prevail in the end. Even if it takes another year or 2 years or even 3 years of flops in the entertainment market, in gaming, series and movies, people will keep waking the fuck up and finding the problem sticking out like a sore thumb. They'll turn away from an interesting boring slop and find their voice against it. It is what it is. It's inescapable because these things, all of this nonsense about diversity, equity and inclusion, injecting creative restrictions like this list on screen right now, which we'll get to later in the video, and things like this from localization teams starting to be used to retroactively inject DEI and ideological content as well as censorship into Eastern media under the guise of simply translating things, etc. All of this stuff not only objectively produces bad products, but it also fosters an environment in these studios for talentless and hinged activists who then lose their minds all over social media, like we just saw from the art director of Avowed, who is so far up inside of a bubble that he legitimately believes that being racist and discriminatory against white people is perfectly fine. These people end up making complete clowns of themselves, the studios they work for, and the games that they represent, and normal people on the outside looking in are going to see just how bad and delusional that looks. And it's not just that either, these environments that they foster are total black holes for morale, originality, brave ideas, and the creative spirit, so a decline in quality is certain to follow. So now that we have set the perspective, let's get to the actual argument. So to reiterate, people, developers, gaming journalists, etc. demonize gamers because gamers have a short fuse and a no BS attitude towards people trying to fuck with their medium. Always has been, always will be. But because in this instance the people trying to fuck with their medium are self-righteous activists who are unable to see past their own reflection, using the medium as a signal booster for their personal beliefs and ideologies, injecting regressive and destructive shit like DEI into games and studios themselves under the guise of progressivism, otherwise known in layman terms as woke garbage, the result is that these gamers are all bad, despicable people. First, this actually creates a very interesting situation where, despite these morons outright hating gamers and labeling us all as these terrible things, they still keep making games instead of finding a job elsewhere. There's a couple of reasons for this, and they are both bad. First, there's the aspect of social engineering. People in high places granting money to companies who push DEI in their workplaces and products via the ESG system. To put it simply, let's say that you're the owner of your own studio. You made a few games that hit it big and now you've got a lot of money. You're expanding your company, taking on bigger projects and hiring more staff. Congratulations. Now you're going to need even more money. In comes BlackRock. They show you a big juicy bag of money and they tell you that it's yours if you're willing to follow a few totally innocent guidelines in the name of the S in ESG, which stands for social. So you either take the easy way out and you say yes and start injecting all manner of dog shit into your studio, such as hiring based on DEI rather than merit, creating departments focused on social impact bullshit that you really don't need to make a video game and that you also don't owe anyone to have because you are a gaming studio, not a university or a daycare center, nor a politician or a presidential administration or a fucking lawyer or anything at all that has anything to do with any of this nonsense. Then those DEI hires and those departments you brought on board start nagging you about certain supposedly problematic things in your last games as well as your upcoming games, so they suggest some changes that you should abide by. As contracts start to end, your department start suggesting that you hire more people based on diversity quotas rather than on merit, because that'll be really good for the ESG score. Then one day you wake up and you're at a point where your studio is passing along lists like this one from Xbox Game Studios, filled with creative restrictions focused on socio-political nonsense, gender theory nonsense, self-ID nonsense, self-marginalization and victim mentality nonsense, etc. Some other day you're also urged to bring along DEI consultants like Sweet Baby Inc. because that's also an ESG booster, and it's of course lovely and wonderful for all of your marginalized members of your studio who will get into contact with game journalists in the industry and write articles about how amazing you are as a studio. And then, sooner or later, your studio is looking like a fucking circus where the developers that made your previous games total bangers that got you where you are have left. The ones that remained are either sitting there silently as if they were in a prison camp, or have totally drank the Kool-Aid and are now so incredibly woked out of their minds that they're embarrassing themselves and your company publicly on social media. Your latest game just came out and it's fucking flopping because you embraced pushing an ideology instead of the fun, liberating and passionate process of creating a truly original experience born out of the artistic drive of talented people who got hired because they were actually passionate and competent within the game development space, rather than just having the correct skin color, genitalia, sexual orientation or political leanings. And of course you're left there all confused, you don't know what the fuck is going on because you were told that this was the way to go. You were told that this was it, and the gaming journalists, they spoke so highly of you and you got so many hearts on Twitter posts and etc. So what is going on? How could this be happening? Oh, I know, the gamers are bigots. Suddenly all of those amazing fans that you had that made your previous games as successful as they were, I don't know, they must have gone down the alt-right pipeline and are now bigots. It's the only possible explanation. So yeah, your studio is boned, but your ESG is as high as it gets, and so you are being benefited by your gracious ESG overlords like BlackRock for aiding them in forcing behaviors.
You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors in terms of diverse employment this year. And what we are doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted, okay?
We're doing the same thing.
And so it's just, you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And
this goes into a whole other topic, by the way, which I will not go into here. Basically, AAA games, which is the ones that these activists latch onto this hard, because of them obviously being the most important ones to impact social and cultural change, are way too expensive to be maintained. I don't think that even BlackRock has an infinite source of money to keep funding trash. But like I said, that's a whole other topic, so you either go down that path or you take the difficult way out, where Daddy BlackRock penalizes you if you're taking loans from them, and you climb your way up to the top out of sheer will, talent, quality, and integrity, managing your ambition and output accordingly, and relying on your successful games to be able to fund bigger, better, and more successful games. It's a hard and risky road, and of course it's much easier to just take the big bag of money. The goal is that as many companies as possible take the easy route and find themselves with these activists. then through a culture of literal fear of cancellation, through a culture of fear of being outcasts for their totally fucking normal opinions, such as, I think our lead female character should look good. They hope to normalize these work environments as normal, and also the bad ideological content that they produce, in hopes that this also becomes normalized by society, even if not by us, then at least by the next generation that is growing up right now. This is just a little receipt for you guys here, just to give you a bit of context, just in case you're listening this far and going, what the fuck is this guy talking about? It's from my video on Ubisoft, which did terribly. So I would guess that most of you have not actually seen this, or at least you haven't heard my take from it. Getting to know Rashi Sika, Ubisoft's VP Global Diversity and Inclusion. Question: how did you come to specialize in diversity and inclusion? Rashi Sika: as an early employee, I was noticing that there seemed to be an archetype of what good talent looked and sounded like. I myself did not fit that archetype, so when I joined Uber's talent team, it was with the goal of challenging that norm and broadening our definition of talent. Holy Jesus! I know she was talking about Uber, but this is all from the Ubisoft website. She was simply using an example of how she operates. This lady is literally trying to make the concept of talent to be racist. You can't make this shit up. If I didn't have these screenshots, you guys would tell me that I'm lying. Hell, I would tell me that I'm lying. But here it is. Someone in charge of their global diversity and inclusion team literally making it their work to change the very definition of talent simply because she wasn't talented enough to make the cut. Instead of self-improvement or simply moving on to a different kind of job. After all, sometimes no matter how hard you work, you just can't do it. I used to study electricity and thermodynamics, I'm not even joking. It was on a course to become an electrician.
Oh yeah, this'll be easy. Let me take a look at the circus board.
Or a technician of refrigerators, air conditioners, freezers, etc. I totally sucked at this stuff. No amount of trying worked. I lost an additional year of my life in a school studying this nonsense until I finally quit and entered a different course in multimedia. That's where I learned the basics of image and video editing, a bit of animation, a bit of programming, a bit of script writing, actual photography, etc. It was much more my style. This lady here instead uses her race and gender to accuse and guilt trip everyone around her, to treat her like a powerless victim of a heteronormative, white supremacist, patriarchal system that deemed her too brown and female to be talented, when in reality talent is a totally abstract thing that doesn't have anything to do with race and gender. It's all about the quality of the work that you can make. Is it really any surprise that Ubisoft's quality as a studio has been in constant decline when they have people trying to redefine the very concept of talent in important positions at their company? I don't want to get negative and rude, but like, what do you want me to do? Huh? What do you want me to do? Look at this. What the fuck do you want me to do? It's not even just that. There's even more. There's an entire monologue about shit that has nothing to do with video games. Again, this entire thing is on Ubisoft's website. I didn't go digging through her past or anything like that. It's all right there, in the gaming studio's website. Instead of stuff about games, it's just a load of garbage about inequities in society, disparities between men and women. Over there, I mean, she's not even talking about like some third world country like there's some where that is actually true. Instead, she's just talking about like fucking Californian modern society bullshit. Also goes on to say that COVID had a much bigger impact on people of color, and that the BLM movement exposed inequities in systems and processes across public and private institutions, of which she of course gives no examples of, because as usual, when it's time to actually show some receipts of these delusions, these people have none. Source? Trust me bro, I used to be part of the Uber talent team. Just like she had no leg to stand on in her argument about talent having a specific way that it looked and sounded. Race-bait nonsense like this is the kind of thing that you can expect to see within social engineering kind of narratives. Basically manipulations and alterations of reality, and a lot of bullying people who have different opinions, often completely harmless. That's what the cancel culture is for. And have you noticed that whenever it was employed, the cancel culture I mean, it was far more celebrated when they managed to cancel someone like Gina Carano, for example, who simply disagreed with pronoun stuff and with the utter demonization of conservatives, than when an actual sexual assaulter got cancelled? This is because in the culture war, a sexual assaulter type of person gives you far less points than just a normal, innocent, articulate person who is able to disagree with their points and still have a career, or hell, even counter-argue their points with far better ones that make sense. People who break the actual law aren't going to be agreed with or anything like that, they're not going to be listened to, but random innocent people with a head on their shoulders? Now that's dangerous for their ideology. J.K. Rowling is another example. This is actually a woman who retroactively made Dumbledore gay, and they also believe she played around with the idea of Hermione being black. By all effects and purposes, a liberal woman perfectly ready to wokeify her own series to make it more progressive. But as soon as she opened her mouth in defense of an acknowledgement of biology, an acknowledgement of basic scientific facts, she was attacked by idiots plus the media in an attempt to cancel her and rid her of her work, including her own co-workers and the people who worked on the Harry Potter movies. You can see for yourself what she thinks of trans people in her own words. There's no transphobia here, just an acknowledgement of facts, and even some normal trans people came out in her defense in all of this, totally agreeing with her. This is what I mean when I talk about normal trans people in some of my videos. Trans people who are not deranged, narcissistic science deniers. And in another occasion, J.K. Rowling spoke out in protection of female spaces from the dangers of gender theory and self-ID policies, which would put them in danger of bad people, specifically men of course, infiltrating them by claiming that they are women. Yet another perfectly realistic and acceptable fear that any parent would have for their children or even for themselves, and that any man would even have for his own wife or mother, and that any female athletes would have for their careers in athletic sports. But these are incredibly dangerous topics and facts for the people vying for this goal of social engineering, because it completely destroys their insane extremist ideals. Deep down they know that you can be a liberally minded person who, for example, believes in the personal freedom of a person to transition because of their dysphoria, so long as it does not start to infringe on other people's rights, safety, or on the very fabric of what truth is, by developing these retarded ideologies fit to eradicate terms such as male and female. And that's what screws up their plans so badly. It's that even at the most basic level of decency, truth, and even tolerance from open-minded people, their radical ideals are still incompatible. So what do they have left? Well, they shut down the argument, they bully people with opposing views, and basically they micromanage the narrative to make sure that everyone is in line with their beliefs. If someone steps off, they get booted off the company, or they get deplatformed, or they get made an example of, etc. We've seen it a bunch of times over the past 10 years or so. And this kind of nonsense is all over the gaming space right now. You can't take a shit without being accused of being a bigot just because you don't like a certain game or just because you like a certain other game a little too much. It has infiltrated game reviews, it has infiltrated game awards, games journalism, game studios, and it has to stop. So that was the aspect of social engineering, lots of power plays with a long-term end goal of changing the way that people think, forcing behaviors, as the CEO of BlackRock himself said. Then there's the ground level aspect, which is much simpler and I think very well exemplified by what we see whenever a woked out developer takes to social media to embarrass themselves by putting their unhinged thoughts and beliefs out on display. We have a lot of examples of this stuff, like we got the owner of the Dustborn studio, Ragnar Tornquist, plagued with white guilt for some reason, regretting that his studio has so many white people, lamenting it and wishing that he could hire more people of color, but since he works in Norway, that's not really an option. We also have one of his developers also taking to social media to let everyone know that she's out of her fucking mind and making games to put knitting men and sexy non-binary peeps in our games. I also love the hypocrisy in using the word sexy. Good fucking luck saying that you want sexy female peeps in your video games. Hell, good luck calling Eve from Stellar Blade sexy. You'll be labeled as a sexist gooner chud before 3 o'clock. We also have the lead actress from Star Wars Outlaw saying that the gaming space is misogynistic. We have David Gator and the Power Rangers of mediocrity at BioWare calling their own fanbase all kinds of shit for criticizing the way that Veilguard was looking before launch. We of course have Matt from Obsidian, who single-handedly fucked his own game's public perception solely through his tweets. Seriously, this guy's words did more damage to Avowed than the pronoun screen ever could have. Oof, and we of course have the pricks at Sweet Baby Inc. so unhinged and ripe with confidence over the past couple of years that they proudly put on display the fact that their goals are a total takeover of the industry, also whose CEO is a racist and use the aforementioned power of cancel culture, specifically coercion and intimidation, to get involved in some projects. There's also the lead writer for Assassin's Creed Shadows defending Yasuke's inclusion by saying that the industry has too many white protagonists, even though the setting of the game is meant to be feudal Japan and nobody was asking for a white protagonist either. And honestly, these just keep coming, guys. We would be here all day. Just look through a few of my videos and you'll find this stuff. I think these examples are all genuine. I don't think that any of these people are faking their emotions just to land a check. Like, these activists are real, and they were hired and put into positions of influence in these companies. Or, you know, they drank the Kool-Aid so much that they turned into this shit through years and years of being surrounded by it. And so I think it shows this other aspect of this whole thing, which is a genuine anger and resentment for the people that they disagree with, a genuine hatred and resentment for gamers and our classic culture of, like, not giving a fuck about any of this, our genuine culture or history or whatever you'd like to call it, of not taking any shit from anyone, of fighting over control of what we play, even if at times we lose some battles here and there, as we did over time with publishers and their monetization. They resent the medium's very core of escapism from real-life bullshit and into compelling worlds and stories with boundless creativity within which the main objective is always to please the players. To these people, these core tenets are unacceptable because a gamer is more than willing to let go of his personal troubles to dive into a fantasy world or a compelling fictional story, etc., and experience something that does not relate to them, something unique, sometimes even something challenging and thought-provoking. And this just doesn't fly in the minds of narcissists who want everything to be about them, who want things to personally and specifically cater to them in the name of inclusion. It also doesn't fly in the minds of people who are sickly obsessed with gender, race, sexuality, and all manner of socio-political and cultural shit. People who are terminally online, purposefully scouring for things to twist and mangle into being offensive to some group of people somewhere in the world, even if they are completely imaginary. And they don't do it through a genuine altruistic desire to make the industry better or to be inclusive and representative of whatever cultures or people that they are pandering to. They simply use these virtues as a sword and a shield to push their damaging agendas through and stick it to the supposedly evil toxic gamers who live rent-free in their minds. If they truly cared about the supposed marginalized minorities that they're pandering to, they would stop what they're doing immediately and find a way to balance it, because as it stands, all they're doing is damaging these communities by associating them with rampant, radical, and intolerable extreme views and actions. This isn't how you foster kindness, understanding, relatability, and ultimately normalization. This is how you foster a radicalization against your values and ideas. One of the funny instances I like to think back to is the NFL. I'm a big fan of Bill Burr's comedy, and one of his routines is about how women took over the NFL because they just had to move in on their space and change things around to make it something that it's not. And now they even have a whole pride section in there with cringy fucking messaging about football being for everyone, as if football was ever gatekept from anyone at all. Keep this in mind, it'll come back in a little bit in the video. In some of my other videos, I speak about good examples of diversity and inclusion, showing games like these here, basically as examples of games that aren't just filled with heterosexual white males, but that also don't virtue signal and simply have well-written characters. I speak of how the end goal of inclusion in games would be, for example, the normalization of certain matters in society. And how the way that these people do it doesn't work because they're tokenizing the supposedly marginalized people that they're trying to be inclusive of. They're creating terrible characters in their name, attached to often terrible games, and even worse online statements from staff members that represent their studios. Activists basically ruin everything, even the very things that they are trying to do activism for. As I just said, a lot of these activists don't have this goal of inclusion at all. People like this Matt Hansen, for example, and like the other morons at Sweet Baby Inc., fully show what their true intentions are with their work, and it's all pretty bad and malicious. It's not about the bullshit that they're virtue signaling for, it's not about the social issues that they use as symbols of what they're supposedly fighting for, it's mostly just to piss gamers off. Matt Hansen admits his work was done with the intent of pissing off Elon Musk. Kim Belair admits her entire studio's purpose is to take over the industry and either burn it to the ground or shape it in their way. And we know what their way is, it's just shit content. There's so much unwarranted hatred for gamers from so many of these activists infesting the industry, especially at the highest levels, and for as long as these people are allowed to keep working at these studios, especially in high positions where they can actually dictate what kind of content or what kind of designs are going into a project, or even what kind of people get hired, we won't be seeing the industry healing and getting back to what it's supposed to be all about. There's always been a natural left-leaning vibe in the world of entertainment, but it never got to the point where the very work that the people were working on became compromised like this, where the core of it has to be changed not just to appeal to people that it was never meant to appeal to, but also to separate itself from the people that it has always appealed to, simply because of this disgusting corruption of the narrative around it being formed to make it look like appealing to an established core audience of a thing is somehow bad and bigoted. And that's not to mention this purposeful direction in making content to purposefully either piss off or alienate conservatives. Like, what the hell kind of stupid ass idea is this? Why would you want to severely limit the reach of your content by purposefully making it to be automatically incompatible with a massive chunk of the population? Never mind the fact that fictional content within the entertainment space should be about escapism, where a story is not only detached from current toxic political matters, but how could you not want to bring people together through your movie or show or game? How can these people claim to be so objectively good and righteous, the pinnacles of morality, goodness and tolerance, but they use their positions to sow hatred and divisiveness instead of just making something good that everyone can enjoy and find common ground in? Black Myth Wukong is a perfect example of this divisive narrative in the gaming industry, where a game that is simply about the Monkey King of Chinese mythology gets labeled as toxic, sexist, homophobic and racist by apparently lacking diversity and inclusion. Suddenly, fans celebrating the launch of a no-nonsense video game solely focused on the pure artistic side of the medium were automatically labeled as toxic right-wingers, with articles like this one making it look like this game was fostering evil. And finally, that brings me to the conclusion. So why do we reject these ideologies? Why are we so adamantly against this stuff that some of us even jump the gun sometimes and are already talking shit about a game simply because of seeing pronouns or body type A and B nonsense in a menu? Why are so many gamers becoming so seemingly radicalized against this kind of thing? Because this has gone far beyond the point of tolerance and comprehension, because this is a total fallacy, a fake fucking shroud of kindness, tolerance and positivity, hiding a rotting fucking goblin leeching off of the industry, destroying it from the inside out of sheer spite for people who dare to want their medium to remain a medium of entertainment and escapism as it was for decades. All art is political. Shut the fuck up. Some art is political. This, however, is just an excuse used to politicize everything. At this point, it doesn't even have anything to do with agreeing or disagreeing with their personal views, because so many of us actually have no problems at all with female characters, or characters of diverse racial or cultural backgrounds, or gay characters, or any of that stuff that has already been more than present in the industry for years. At this point, it's simply down to wanting games to be good, wanting games to be made without an ideological agenda attached to them, because these agendas have proved to destroy them, caking them with overt messaging or dulling them down with unnatural creative restrictions like that Xbox Game Studios image I brought up earlier. Stuff like this doesn't just contain rules and restrictions on how you must represent different races and cultures, even if they don't fit within a setting. It doesn't just contain quotas in how much screen time self-described minority characters must have, even if it doesn't fit within the narrative of the story. Never even mind the fact that they shouldn't even be considered minorities in the fantasy world where they're equally represented. It doesn't just try to inject actually sexist gender theory and identity politics bullshit that has been watering down and attacking the value of femininity and feminine virtues and values by constantly trying to present females in leading positions with masculine features in both their faces, bodies, and personalities. It doesn't just contain needless invasive conditions such as respectfully validating different groups of people and different cultures and experiences and all of this other garbage, but it also impacts everything around it. Because none of this stuff is inclusive. When you present this stuff to gamers, you're not asking them to be inclusive of elements that will simply be there, as the word says, to be inclusive of more people. You are progressively asking them to kiss goodbye to any elements that made their favorite medium successful. In other words, you simply can't have sensitivity and political correctness be part of your inclusiveness, because it will be exclusive of so many elements that can otherwise be considered offensive or tactless or rude or misrepresentative or invalidating to some random fuck on the other side of the planet that one of your internal unhinged activists living in fucking California or some shit will make a fuss about over nothing. This is personally my main problem with this stuff. Total and complete unhinged morons drunk on power telling me what I should and shouldn't be offended about, what words I should and shouldn't use, what I should and shouldn't think about a given situation, and being the actual authority on what can and can't be shown in a game. It is the fact that this kind of mentality completely destroys creativity and quality. You can never have anything interesting because everything has to be filtered through shit lists like these, where there's so many things required to keep in mind, so many restrictions, so many considerations, so many barriers, so many eggshells all over the damn floor, that what comes out on the other side is a big pile of fucking uninspired, insipid, gutless nothing. No risk, no reward, no passion, no love, no excitement, no thrill, no stakes, no nothing. Just corporate slop with heavily filtered worlds, politically correct characters, spineless writing, and regime-approved political messaging. And that is simply too big of an ask. Let's just call this what it is. This stuff is not inclusion, it's a takeover of the gaming space. Think back to the NFL stuff we just touched on. Did they really need to pander to the rainbow alphabet mafia in order to be inclusive of them? Did gay people need that shit in order to be able to like football?
What are you, fucking stupid?
My brother, it's a fucking sport. You look at it, you figure out if you like it or don't, and then based on that assessment, you either engage with it or you don't. You either watch it or you switch the channel and you either go and train to compete in it or you fucking go to school to be an air conditioning technician. This insane idea of pandering is so infuriating and tiresome because it's just placing this fake narrative down. It implies that it wasn't quote-unquote inclusive before, when in reality it didn't even have anything to be inclusive of. It's just a thing. You want it, you get it, you're free to do whatever the fuck you want. It's like getting a fucking sandwich and a Coke. You step up to the counter and you ask for it. You don't need a fucking sign outside the shop saying LGBTQIA++ sandwiches and Cokes. And it's the same with the gaming space. If you enjoy video games, you play video games. That's it. There's plenty of them to choose from. There's loads of different types of genres and stories to pick and engage with. There's big blockbuster stuff and small indie stuff and all kinds of other crap in between and even totally outside of that orbit. You want to know what it's like to drive a fucking bus? Bam! There you go. You can even realize your fantasy of owning a power washer and cleaning the most disgusting fucking backwaters of this world. There's already even a whole universe of inclusion games, games fit for inclusion for LGBT people, etc. Obviously made with far smaller budgets because, duh, you have to work within your means, you have to know your audience, you have to know your reach, you have to know the limits of what you can achieve with something like that. You have to know that it's not smart, for example, to take something massive like Dragon Age, which is expensive to make, and turn it into a fucking DEI and political correctness simulator. I hate seeing this kind of pandering. It gives me the ick. It's automatic. I'll never not roll my eyes at this nonsense. And in the gaming space, it goes far beyond a little virtue signaling. It goes into a total takeover of this space by the hand of these unhinged activists fueled by hatred for their own paying customers and other random fucking people like Elon Musk apparently. Like, imagine wanting to turn your game into slop because you want to own Elon Musk. Like, what are you smoking, big dog? Why aren't these activists and these consulting companies just doing their own thing in this massive gaming space? Why is it that this crap is targeting the AAA market, targeting massive studios and publishers who were once worth a damn? Because it was never about the inclusion or the diversification of a goddamn thing. It's about taking established titans in the industry and putting them to work to further their own agendas. It's about spiteful revenge and discrimination against those who dare to not think the same way that they do. It's about the inability to allow one subsection of our society, entertainment in this case, to exist free of the influences of social engineering, to exist as an actual free thing that brings people joy and escapism, and worse, something that can and always has actually brought people of all kinds of different cultures, beliefs, religions, wealth, backgrounds, ages, etc. together with one common love for the medium. This is why this shit is rejected so furiously. This is why people are speaking out the way that they do, and no amount of dishonest framing of the argument fit to turn this into a nonsensical matter of bigotry is going to change that fact. There is nothing of value in allowing or enabling or tolerating or embracing this kind of garbage to take over the games industry. There is no virtue in it at all. On the surface, it's just a playground for entitled, maladjusted activists to vent their unwarranted anger, hatred, racism, and frustrations on undeserving people. And beneath the surface, it's just a disgusting back-alley game of power and influence. There's nothing worth tolerating here, not anymore. Maybe at some point in the past, in the very beginning of this kind of shit, there was some altruistic motive behind some poor sod who wanted the hobby to appeal to a wider variety of people of different ages and more refined tastes and to more women, etc. A goal that eventually the industry did get to, contributing to a healthy gaming space with so much diversity in things to play. But even if that was true, that reality is long gone, and all that we have left now with these movements, initiatives, programs, etc. is an irredeemable, disease-ridden parasite that is far better off destroyed for the sake of the remainder of the industry. Strip away the politics, strip away the personal opinions on differing views, strip away the idea of conservatism versus liberalism, strip away everything to do with a clash of ideologies. At the very core of all of this is a visible, sharp decline in quality. The games are becoming worse and worse and worse. Why the hell would the evil, toxic gamer collective want to tolerate the continuance of that outcome, especially when they have a clear window with a view of the source of the problem? Not too long ago, my girlfriend told me that I shouldn't be that sad or worried about a gaming crash, because in the place of old beloved IPs, studios and publishers lost to either complete ideological takeover or bankruptcy, or both, since they both go hand in hand, would be new studios and new IPs rising from the ashes of all of this shit, invigorated and impassioned to make good, compelling content that we are sorely missing. And that's definitely a little sliver of hope, a silver lining if you will, to think of as we close off this video. Sometimes we already even hear of some new studios being created from veteran developers of other studios that have been going down a certain road, like for example Rebel Wolves, which has former developers from CD Projekt Red. And of course there's also the Eastern market. While there is a danger that they will also fall to these things because of how the West is pushing it on them, there's also a good chance that maybe they will still be able to continue making good games, with newer studios showing up on the scene and rejecting these ideologies, such as Shift Up, the developer of Stellar Blade. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel to not miss any future content, and feel free to check out some of my other videos. I have a lot of trash in my account from years of using this account as a dumping ground for random gaming clips, but all of my most recent videos are in this style and will continue to be going forward. With that said, have yourselves a great day and I'll see you on the next one.